Well, hello, friends. Something's been on my mind for a while, and so I wanted to talk about it. I made a bike ride video where I was talking about some of these things, but I wanted to make one in front of the camera because I was exposed to some articles recently that kind of fit in with what I was thinking about and what my concerns are. And they have loosely to involve, you know, demonstrations, no kings, things like that. If you look back over the last, let's say, 5 decades or whatever, you'll find mass protests and sometimes mass movements that are global. Boycott and divest, the apartheid South African system, for example, Vietnam War protests that lasted for years and years and years. People get together and they act together to try to create political and social change, which is good. I think it's good to go out and have a No Kings protest. I often wonder why people aren't as excited to protest against what happened in Gaza. But anyway, especially in America, it's understandable primarily because of the constant stream of propaganda that is pernicious and incessant. And I don't like it all, but whatever. So, anyway, sometimes I have conversations with friends about this, intimating that, or stating outright that I don't think these protests are enough or can be enough because we've lost social infrastructure and we've been losing that for decades. At least since the 70s, I think it started to go back down again. There's a kind of social apathy that's, you know, reasserting itself in our culture, especially in the United States, a little bit less so in affluent countries in Western Europe. Inequality and wealth and other forms of social infrastructure matter as well. The less worried you are about your day-to-day life, the more opportunities you're going to have for leisure, for reading, for education, for self-help, if you will, for social groups and organizations and all that kind of thing. And these are good because they exercise your people skills. We're social apes, social animals, and we need social interaction. So the more Ayn Randian, individualistic, neoliberal kind of anarcho-capitalist or whatever, there's, many ways to look at it. Margaret Thatcher, the further you go down that line of thinking and reasoning and believing and being, the more detached you become from a diverse community of people that you can have social interactions with. And the more social interactions you have or are afforded via your culture and your economy and all kinds of other factors, the easier it is to think in various ways and to question your own beliefs and to be inquisitive, curious, to want to learn, to want to know, to want to grow, and also to be able to, exercise recursive thinking and critical thinking, and also self-criticism, or at least self-awareness, where you are thinking, do I have this right? Or maybe I should get some help with it or examine it more closely or something. You can think probabilistically. You can think in terms of Occam's razor. Maybe some things that happen are, the simplest answer is the right one. People become very sensitive when they're socially isolated and lonely, and there seems to be a loneliness epidemic in the Anglosphere, UK, the United States, places like that, where there's growing inequality and discomfort between class groups and so on. It's complex, but it's also very understandable, and there's plenty of research looking at these things: social apathy, social infrastructure, uh, cultural capital, things like that. So just to talk about that for a sec, I made a document here. I was trying to write something about social transformation, deep social, political, and economic change in the light of energy and ecology and other global issues. That's another thing you have to think about, is that we live in a world where there are all kinds of different countries out there, not just America. And Nigerians love Nigeria, Russians love Russia, Chinese love China. And when there's so much effort to create enmity between one nation and another, I would question it, and I wouldn't think it would be stressful or wrong to do so. Sometimes I question things and people take it personally. And, they don't like being questioned because they're much more sensitive, I think, possibly because of the lack of social infrastructure and interaction, perhaps, and other things. But people want to feel good. They want to feel comfortable. And so doing something rather than nothing is good, and it helps them feel good about themselves. But it's not necessarily enough. I think we need to spend more time building social capital and social infrastructure and getting together and learning how to act together, to do things together on a regular basis to accomplish our goals. So if you're thinking just in human terms, what do you want? Why do you want it? How are you going to get there? Um, you know, you have to think strategically. You have to be able to talk to a diverse group of people to understand how they think and so on. You can't just isolate yourself into a clique and think you understand how things are going in the world. I think if we understood that other countries have cultures and care about their cultures and would fight for what they believe in, what they value, it would help us quite a bit in understanding ways either to cooperate and collaborate instead of war with people, uh, or if we had to go to war, to understand our enemies, perspective and values, and in so doing, understand their strategies and tactics better, and their capabilities better. But anyway, yeah, there's so much to talk about when you go down these, when you think about these subjects, and so it's not easy for me extemporaneously just to talk about all this stuff, because I'll go down one track and another, get all confused. But about social apathy and all that kind of thing, I wanted to talk a bit about that so you understand. And a lot of this is inspired by a book I read at the beginning of the summer called Don't Talk About Politics, which is by Sarah Stein Lubrano. And she's a really interesting woman. For a long time, I followed this website and videos and stuff from the School of Life. Ideas to help you learn, heal, and grow. The School of Life. I love it. They talk about philosophers and artists and all kinds of interesting stuff in praise of nice people, sociability, relationships, love, and the decline of religion, self-knowledge, the need for people to repeat missing stages of emotional life, and so on and so forth. Anyway, this woman was the content something or another. What was she doing at that? Oh, she was head of content at the School of Life, and I really like the content. I think she's interesting. So She used to work in the UK with the Sense and Solidarity Initiative and Future Narratives Lab, and things like that. She's an expat from the States, a Jewish, secular Jewish American woman. And she's mentioned a long time ago that if she said anything against the IDF or Israel, she'd be considered a traitor. But a lot of Jewish people in the United States are traitors then because they don't like what the government's doing. But that's another story altogether. But I think she's really interesting. You can look her up. And the book is really, really good. It's a short read or listen if you like audiobooks, and it's very informative and it will help you understand better how to think about politics and talk about politics. And you may not be interested in politics, or maybe politics stresses you out, but politics is interested in you. You can't get away from it. The No Kings thing, the Trump thing, everything led up to that, from George Washington cutting down the cherry tree and not being able to tell a lie, all the way up, de Tocqueville talking about civil society in America, all the way up to this day. All the protests in between, Black Lives Matter, the women's protests, movements during the first Trump administration, you name it. There's been so many. And it's all led up to this.
Can we make any more room that way? Can we scoot down that way?
I mean, where are we now? We have a polycrisis. We have wars brewing all over the place, unnecessary conflict. It's really getting crazier and crazier. And I've talked about, and reactionary movements in the States, Mencius Moldbug, people like this for years. I shared Project 2025 when it first came out. I read it. It seems like people don't pay any attention, and then they have a chance to go out and have a nice march, and they get excited. And for a while, they feel like, oh, they've done their bit and they're pretty excited about it, but then they forget about everything and go back to their normal life, and nothing really changes. It's kind of like going to a self-help seminar and getting really pumped up, and for 2 or 3 weeks, you're implementing your routines, new routines, and habits, establishing new habits, and whatever it is. And after a while, you just stop and you go back to the median, the baseline of your former behavior. Anyway, so when I suggest that to some people, they get really upset and then they don't want to talk to me anymore because I hurt their feelings. I think this is a tad bit too sensitive, but I understand where that sensitivity comes from. And I think reading that book sheds light on it as well as anything. But as you know, I follow Indy, who's a polemicist, social critic. He's a Sri Lankan American who moved back to Sri Lanka. He's a bit acerbic, a bit uncomfortable to read for a lot of people because it's like, are we the bad guys? Is Uncle Sam bad? And people get nervous and upset about that. And maybe we are the bad guys. And it doesn't hurt to ask the question anyway. I mean, it's a valid question, and exploring it wouldn't hurt, right? I think it's kind of a moral and ethical duty in a way to examine one's behavior, what one supports as a citizen. Also, performative democracy, where you're voting every once in a while for a candidate who's the chosen candidate of the neoliberal class, of the corporatists, bought and paid for. Who are they serving? I don't think our leaders are serving us. I don't think our leaders care enough about um, complex living systems. And we depend on complex living systems. I don't think they understand physics. I don't think they understand biology and a lot of other things. And I recognize that it's taxing to learn things. It's easier to believe things. Stories are comfortable and exciting and simplistic, and you can be dogmatic about them. You can call a story the truth, and then relax. You know the truth. Learning things requires some effort, some work. Converting some calories and you know, in your brain, some glucose in the brain into thought and action and all that kind of thing. So it's harder to learn a skill or something new. It requires time. You need leisure. You need social infrastructure. You need libraries. When I was young, I used to go to the library. At school, I used to audit classes, so outside my major because I thought, well, what is physics about? What is quantum mechanics about? Just sit in on a lecture and realize you're never going to be able to do the math, but finding it fascinating and knowing there are people who are working really, really hard to understand quantum mechanics. They're not going to be prone to magical thinking about it because they understand the subject. And university campuses, if you're wealthy enough to attend a university, uh, have activities all the time. They have common areas where people can hang out and do things. Uh, the social infrastructure is there. Sometimes governments, organizations that are usually sponsored by the power elite, dismantle social infrastructure to control people. I think you should really look into Palantir, for example, what's going on with that company. Study about it, learn about it. In so many ways, I think some governments and some powerful groups of people, organizations, corporations, institutions would like to dismantle social capital and infrastructure to keep people helpless and confused and tired and burned out. So they don't have the intellectual and the emotional energy to deal with the complexities of modern life. And this is a mistake, of course, because it leads to breakdown, collapse. It leads to chaos and violence and war. But, one thing about the power elite, they always overestimate their intelligence, their strategic capability, analysis, everything. They just overestimate it because they're wealthy and they have resources and they have time on their hands and they can focus on what they're interested in and actually get what they want. Whereas most of us can't. We want things, but we can't because we're turned against each other and we're fighting each other rather than looking at the people in power and wondering why they're not affording us what we deserve and desire and need to be a healthy constituency. Anyway, I read this article and I wrote a comment in there. I said, I wrote this 12 or 17 times over the last 20 years, which means an article similar to what he just wrote. I've talked about it, written about it for years, in different ways, of course, and I've had the conversation dozens of times because this is a subject I like to discuss. People with the cognitive capacity and leisure time to indulge the kind of curiosity we know have chosen to suppress their opportunity to learn because the dissonance it unleashes is too painful and horrific to confront. Sometimes learning something is uncomfortable because it's not what you thought it should be, or it goes against your former beliefs or something like that. Folks want to feel good about themselves in isolation, hanging on the tattered threads of fantastic stories, which is impossible. What I mean is, it's impossible to feel good about yourself in isolation. Very few of us are ascetics. But we cling to the stories, right? And of course, social media has exacerbated all of this and increased the control over us by the power elite. And this isn't conspiratorial thinking, propaganda, advertising, public relations, all these information streams that we're content is there for a purpose. It's to get something or to get you to behave a certain way, manipulation and all that kind of thing. So they suffer and believe, like all people trying to do the right thing, the right thing. When you point out the obvious, like the past 250 years, and ask, so where are we now? The last 8,000 years have brought us precisely to this place you fret about and hang your hopes on. So it's ironic that on one hand we worry and are fearful or concerned, uncomfortable, angry, outraged. And on the other hand, we're hanging our hopes on the status quo, on all of these stories that we're being conditioned to believe. That's ironic. And I'm not trying to upset people because of some extreme thinking or thinking I'm smart or anything. I think these are valid questions and avenues we should all be looking at and thinking about and examining. So, for example, would you be proud of me, my friend, if I were the bully producer of Groundhog Day 15? So, you know the movie Groundhog Day, the guy gets up every morning and relives the same day, and it takes him a long time to figure it out. Imagine if you were producing a franchise of that movie. And sometimes I feel like it's like that. We're getting nowhere. We're just living the same thing. It's almost habitually going through the motions and staying in one place. I think we have to really redefine what we mean by progress. What is progress about? It's definitely about more than gadgets and technology and science and so on. Are we talking about social progress? What do we mean by that? Are we talking about sustainability? Is there anything there, for posterity? What is it you want? Why do you like it? How are you going to get it? How are you going to sustain it and keep it? And we have to fight for what we achieve constantly or we lose it, right? To make progress, we have to constantly work at it and it has to evolve. And some people obviously would be more comfortable if we just had dogmatic beliefs and adhered to that and a certain social hierarchy and adhered to that and so on and so forth. And we had thousands of years like that, but we're still human. And those were violent, tumultuous years. They weren't, there wasn't an ideal period in any of them. And if you want to go back to Athenian democracy, you have to remember that slavery provided the leisure time for people to walk around philosophizing and coming up with ideas like democracy, right? You wouldn't have a Plato or an Aristotle without some leisure time. And you wouldn't have the leisure time without slaves. And coming up into the late 19th century and the suffragettes, early 20th century, and so on, when people are fighting for the right to vote, women's rights or whatever at any given period of time, they need some leisure time, some social infrastructure to be able to fight that fight. If they're too busy carrying water and mending socks and washing clothes by hand and gathering food and cooking food and all that stuff, they're not going to have a whole lot of time for the kind of social infrastructure and work, collaboration, and cooperation and communication required, especially for modern techno-industrial culture and civilization. One can argue that maybe in the Middle Ages things were a lot simpler. People didn't think so much. there were fewer people who could read. Literacy was lower, and on and on. You can, make comparisons and look at how these things were and try to imagine. I mean, if you were living during a time when, you know, the Scythian hordes were raiding your villages or whatever. And we have to remember, some of these population bottlenecks occurred because one big tribe of people had certain skills and abilities, robustness, genes, and they were capable of roaming the steppes and eating and drinking milk. And I forget the name of the culture, Yanomami or something like that. Um, anyway, they wound up going all over Europe and West Asia, around the Caspian area, down into India. Anyway, they were so successful, and they were hierarchical, patriarchal, and so when they went into new places, they would kill the men and take the women and breed with the women. So the X and Y chromosome imbalance happened, and you're like, what happened to all the men? Were they all murdered by aliens or something? No, they were killed by these highly successful groups of people who were migrating around and who believed in killing the men and mating with the women. So their genes replaced these other genes. And, and obviously, in a hierarchical group, some men will mate with a lot of women, and other men will mate with far fewer. Anyway, that's an interesting story. But all of these things over the period of human civilization up till now, I was thinking about carrying water and leisure time. The suffragettes had time to drink gin and hang out with their female friends and talk about things they wanted and talk about politics and talk about culture and everything. And this led to their wanting the right to vote. Uh, and so, they worked at it. So you need that leisure time. You need a little bit of extra time and energy and also just desire to want to know things. And some of us don't want to know because it's scary or it goes against what we want to believe or something like that. So the people I've known for 30 or 40 years remark that it's hard to talk with me while I hold my current POV, point of view, as if my point of view hadn't been evolving for decades under the yoke of my curiosity. So if you're curious and inquisitive, over time, you're going to shift your understanding of things. It's going to continually evolve. And so it's not like you've just suddenly decided that you like this and dislike that. And I don't even know you anymore, man. I think a lot of times friends don't really listen to you. They hear what they want to hear. And if what they don't want to hear kind of goes in one ear and out the other, and they forget what you talked about 10 years ago anyway because they weren't that interested. And people do tend to prick up their ears when something they're interested in comes up. Unless you're constantly having a conversation with somebody, in a relationship with somebody, and doing things with that person, you lose continuity. So I've been an expat for a long time, and I've known people different eras of my life, like my Japan era, my China era, my Hong Kong era, my San Francisco, whatever. And you get close to certain people and you remember each other from that period of time, but you really don't know each other now. But you're in touch on social media. So you think you're still close. And in fact, you don't know that much about each other. And you want to share and learn and keep in contact and keep the continuity of the friendship going, but it's not as easy as you think. And so a lot of times people, it's frustrating when you think, well, I've been writing and publishing and a blog and all this stuff for so long, and it's just like nobody hears me. So, sometimes you're like, what's the point? Well, the people that I meet with here where I live and have social interaction with and do things with know me, they understand me. I feel that connection, and it's a good feeling. I understand why people feel bad when their church ostracizes them or something, because they had that social group that was so important to them, and they've lost it. A lot of times with these kinds of groups that are highly ideological or sectarian or whatever, they'll weed out people that don't believe exactly what the inner leaders of the group believe, right?
We valued being different. We valued having smaller numbers because it was like this sort of Gnostic idea. We have,
We're elect.
Yeah.
We have this.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we used to tell this joke once I kind of got out of that really narrow. There's a I don't want to say it because they'd hate me for it, but like a more liberal version of mid-acts dispensationalism. This joke where they'd say, a guy is standing on a bridge at night looking up at the stars, and another guy walks up behind him and stands at the rail with him and says, "Man, isn't it beautiful what our Creator has made?" And the guy looks over at him and says, "Are you a Christian?" He says, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, "Me too." And so they shake hands. And he says, "Well, let me ask you a question. Are you a Protestant or a Catholic?" And they say, "Well, I'm a Protestant." And they go, "Me too." And so they hug. And the guy says, "All right, let me ask you. Are you like a covenant theologian or are you a dispensationalist?" And the guy kind of says, "Well, I'm a dispensationalist." He says, "I can't. So am I." And so they exchange numbers. And he says, "Well, okay. Here, let me ask you this: Are you an Acts 2 dispensationalist or an Acts 9 dispensationalist?" He says, "Well, I'm an Acts 9 dispensationalist." "I can't believe so am I." And so they exchange, or they set up a time for their kids to play together. And as they're walking along, the phrase says, "Well, let me ask you this: Do you think the 12 apostles are in the body of Christ or out of the body of Christ?" And the guy says, "Well, I think they're in the body of Christ." He says, "You heretic," and he pushes him off the bridge.
Oh.
And that's how it was, right? It's like the huddle. We'd all huddle up, and then we'd look around and say, "Now, where do we disagree?" And then we'd get rid of that guy. Now we're smaller. Now, where do we disagree? That's how it was.
So for a while, it's like, oh yeah, you fit in, it's okay. But then they realize, oh no, you believe that. Oh no, you think that. And then pretty soon they'll have nothing to do with you because they're not that open-minded, right? Um, some people are like that. They don't feel comfortable around people who think differently. And a lot of conservatives are like this. Um, anyway, that's a problem. People want to fit in. They want to have community. They want to have friendships and so on. But sometimes some cliques are just very narrow, not very accommodating. So you really, with social infrastructure on a broad basis, culturally, you are exposed to more diversity of opinion, different uh, classes of people, different kinds of groups, different uh, racial groups, whatever, differences. So in my life, I've traveled a lot, so I've always been comfortable with that. Um, I've appreciated how people are different, and I've grown to understand how much they cling to and love their cultures and beliefs and food and whatever, traditions. And so I don't think that mine is the be all and end all point of view, worldview, way of life. People are ready to hear. People hear what they want to hear when they're ready to hear it, and if they're not ready to hear it, they're not going to hear it. So don't assume that just because you've had a few conversations with somebody you rarely see, that they've heard you, that they really understand you. And a lot of times people are also afraid to share what they really think and feel. Um, so you can't assume you understand them either. You have to have a deep active connection with somebody to understand them. So the revolution won't ignite until people are angry. And they will have to suffer much more humiliation and discomfort with the North zombie white before that happens. So Indy's metaphor for, the insane, competitive, colonial, imperial culture historically and today is white, because generally white Europeans really made an art of it. They're good at killing each other and making war on each other, but they're also really good on competing for the spoils of global resources. Slavery and all that kind of stuff, the age of discovery and all that kind of stuff, going from one land to another using the resources, John Locke, Adam Smith, Calvinism, somehow it's our divine right and duty to make use of the land through private property ownership and exploitation and whatever. I mean, that's one way to think about it. But if you're incurious, you're going to lack imagination and you're not going to be able to think of other ways to think about it. So we get conditioned, trained to believe things and think certain things, and then we can't imagine other ways of doing stuff. So unfortunately, when people finally get angry and humiliated enough, whether it's in Central America with a dictator or South America or anywhere in the world, if it's like the Bolshevik Revolution or the Chinese Cultural Revolution or whatever it is. Some of these things are really ginned up and socially engineered. Some of them are just spontaneous mass out expression of anger, and I'm sick of it. I'll die rather than live like this. And I think when you think about, Hamas, and I don't want to get into that because people are so ignorant of why these conflicts start and all that. But anyway, it's not easy to defeat a group of people who have been fighting for so long, for generations, and have been oppressed and maltreated and imprisoned for so long. At some point, they just say, "No, I'm stubborn. I'm going to fight to the end because I just can't take it." And I'm not just, you're not going to just ask me to move to Jordan or Egypt or whatever. I'm going to walk away. I'd rather die. And of course, they have their belief systems as well. So I often mention that, intellectual influencers in the United States tend to rationalize that what we do is for the right reasons, freedom, democracy, whatever. And what other people do is just, if it goes against us, it's terrorism. They should want us to manage their business because we're superior to them. And if they don't understand that, there's something fundamentally wrong with them. And then we can label them terrorists if they want to beg to differ with us. When you're weird, Western educated, industrial, rich, and democratic, got enough money, you hang out at the market with friends singing ABBA songs in Holland or screaming at NFL players in the USA with hot dog and beer breath. Because you have time to enjoy your addictions and entertainments and activities and leisure, and everything's beautiful, right? You're wealthy. But around the world, people aren't so wealthy and they're unhappy and lonely and sick. This leads to all kinds of mental and physical pathologies when you're lonely, when you don't have leisure time and feel oppressed when there's inequality. It's a thing. So ancient Athenians needed people and animals to slave away so they could walk about philosophizing. We have oil and gas working for us. That is ending. Unfortunately, these resources aren't infinite. The economies involved with them get out of whack. Prices plummet or skyrocket. Supplies diminish, so on and so forth. And things happen. And then the whole way of life that you're so comfortable with and dependent on and used to just suddenly goes away, like you've had the rug pulled out from under you, and you wonder, what the heck just happened? And, it doesn't have to be that way. We could prepare for this and manage the decline or the simplification or whatever. The population goes up and then it goes down. It happens all the time. The only reason our population had this sustained growth for so long is because of oil and gas, fertilizer, and so on, and being able to transport things because of diesel fuel and machines and all that kind of stuff. So the most brutal dictator is circumstances, and he will make people angry enough to learn what they need to survive in panic mode. So once you just allow circumstances to dictate your mood and feelings and anger and actions, you're in panic mode and you're just learning to survive at that point. While we do the dirty deeds needed for another population bottleneck, some other highly successful group of people to run around doing what they do, and also starvation, it's just a terrible thing, and we've seen these famines in our lifetime, and it's a terrible way to go. And unfortunately, we have that to look forward to. I hate to say it, but we're not going to have a replicator or energy too cheap to meter, ever. You have to understand physics, basic physics, and thermodynamics to appreciate that. And you have to understand what life really is, as opposed to the fifth dimension or the spirit and the soul in heaven or whatever that is. That's fine. There may indeed be another place. I don't know how we would ever prove that. There's no proof of it so far, but anyway, there is. That's good for you. But what does that do here? It doesn't help people under the rubble in Gaza very much. So anyway, we will all be hunter-gatherers again, just another animal in the food chain, and the gods will be angry again too. Hopefully next time, and what I mean by that is we will be much more simple in our thinking, and we'll wonder why things are so rough. And back in the day, all the myths and so on, people thought the gods were angry. Hopefully next time we will leave the Coke bottle where it lies and start our fires the traditional way. And that's a reference to the film The Gods Must Be Crazy. A bushman in South Africa finds a Coke bottle, and then he wants to take the bottle back to where it came from because it doesn't belong out there.
As we all know, when something falls from the sky, it can only have come from the gods. Of course, the gods only send good and useful things. However, this time they made a mistake. The gods must be crazy. The unusual story of Key, the bushman, as he travels to the edge of the earth to return the gods' mistake. A most unpredictable journey, fraught with dangerous gorillas, a modest school teacher, a dedicated scientist, a tree bearing strange fruit, bizarre machinery, and wild beasts. The gods must be crazy. A serious and revealing look at civilized man. Organized.
Stop!
Gallant.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Poised.
How far do we have to go?
Sensible. Suave and debonair.
I brought you here. I'm sorry.
Gentle.
He's got to take the money. It's the law.
He can't use that stuff.
Well, I have to.
Bushmen don't know about money.
And as for the edge of the earth, a sense of wonder, a touch of magic. The Gods Must Be Crazy, an epic comedy of
in nature. It's a great movie. It was done in the 70s. Highly recommend it. Hopefully, next time we will leave the Coke bottle where it lies and start our fires the traditional way. Until then, the white, the global north, global capital, neoliberal financialized capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, exploitation, extraction, the whole machine that just eats the world and causes extinctions and wars and all that stuff will keep going. And they will jealously defend the status quo until it kills them. Because at some point it will kill them. All the big shots, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Donald Trump, all the big shots in the world who think that they're going to be immortal aren't going to be. They will pass away. Who knows what happens after death, but they'll be gone. And the chaos and the destruction, ecocide, the consequences of their activities will destroy their way of life. It will wreck their economic ideology eventually. It's inevitable. You don't need to be Marxist. You don't need to be anything, Buddhist. You don't need the rapture, anything like that. It will happen because of nature, because of physics, because of biology. And if, as Eric Lee says all the time, ask nature, it has all the answers. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. And examining our own nature is uncomfortable as well. So what is the name of this article, just to let you know? Curiosity or Lack Thereof. And I will read it next time, parts of it next time. I've gone long enough now. All right, take good care. Bully MT, out.